Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reacts where today we've got ourselves a track from an act named Cicada titled Malnourished, and if we switch over to here we've got ourselves a track on YouTube apparently. This is a two-piece consisting of Solomon, who is the vocalist and does a lot of the production, or at least partial mixing as I understand it, and we've also got their mate who is involved as well doing a lot of the other cool musical stuff. We're going to listen through this track from start till finish and we're going to hear what we think. Let's do it, let's go, what have we got? I'd like to call and respond to those guitars. That bass is fantastic, I love the sizzle to it. Various automation of filters. Bit of vocal fry there, nice. And that's it. That's the track. Nice and short and succinct. We're going to talk about it more in the conclusion. And actually, before we get into the conclusion, I've just realized we have some lyrics apparently for this song, Malnourished. Walk around all confident, who do you take it from, seeing sounds and blanket them over me. See, these are interesting lyrics. I kind of like the imagery with them. What you don't tell is what I will never know. What I don't see is what you haven't told. I can't watch you stand malnourished. It seems like you're so belated. I came out of myself all bloated. I'm surprised you never shook me off. By yourself you walk around and wonder how you got here, but you see them now, hypocrite thoughts, and the light feels fine. I'm not sure about this one, but we're going to talk about it more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Cicada titled Malnourished. In this section I'm going to be providing an overall song analysis of everything from lyrics and vocals all the way through production, as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. But first of all, what do we think this track is about? I'm still kind of figuring this one out, I think. When I discussed in the first verse, walk around all confident, who do you take it from? It seems like almost we're looking at them with like a false sense of confidence, and they're almost like they're hiding things from us. Then in the chorus, they're talking about staying malnourished, so maybe they're false that confidence has actually led them into a position where the person we're discussing is actually in a lesser situation. And when they discuss themselves feeling bloated, it's almost like maybe they don't feel like they deserve the person or not. Maybe the other person was malnourished simply because they thought they had everything but they didn't, and now they see the hypocrite thoughts and maybe they've learned more about themselves in the situation. There's been like some development there. And at the end, what I don't know is how long you've got to go, and the end comes what you've got to show. So my best guess of what this track is about is effectively it's about someone looking at another who's been going through a difficult time period, has had a false confidence about themselves and their situation that they're in. They've had some sort of relationship, whether healthy or not, potentially parasocial, or like a relationship where there's been sort of like a parasitic thing going off and they're shaking them off. And effectively, yeah, it's about sort of like taking more than you're giving and looking at the person, having realized what is actually happening to them and what they're going to do with that. You know, what have they got to show? So I think with that in mind, it's an interesting story. I haven't really listened to a track like that before. I think the vocal performance sells us quite well. There's this interesting sort of synthetic tone to it throughout there. We show solid vocal technique with our head and chest voice. We've got a nice consistency with our approach. There's kind of a radio filterish kind of cutting in the low end there. There's a bit of distortion as well as vocal fry occasionally, which I think helps it sit in the mix of all the different elements, especially including that sort of distorted fizzy bass that we have at times. But I like the changes in the expression of the vocals as we go through the piece. I like that in some of those sort of call and response or gaps in those verse lines that we had the vocals going side by side. Just from an interest perspective, having to kind of bounce around is kind of a cool idea. I think the use of double tracking or harmonies there gives it this kind of caustic kind of feel to it. It sounds a bit kind of grainy there and a little bit more organic. Like there's a sense of angst and anxiety about it. But it also sounds kind of trendy, I think, in a sense, because of how well it's connected to a lot of those other kind of bass and sort of harsher drum elements. And with that kind of shout that we have at the end there around the 155 mark with that kind of vocal fry there, it's just a really interesting way to end it there. It's almost like we're a bit more sort of violent at that point, like we've been restraining ourselves and holding back, like we're calling out and we're not sure how to find release or relief within ourselves. Like we're watching someone from afar sort of walk their own journey and kind of have their Bildungsromanesque kind of thing occur, but we're kind of sitting here stuck. But I ultimately feel like the variety of different melodies that we have, as well as, again, the use of the double tracking of the vocals to give them extra size and heft within the piece of certain elements helps them to stand out. They've got a solid presence within the mix, and they pay attention to what's going on with surrounding orchestration and instrumental parts to not sort of overshadow or overwhelm things. I think in general the production is tight, but we'll talk about that at the end. This track itself is 2 minutes 15, so it's just within that 2 to 4 minute sweet spot, where if it's less than 2 minutes, we might be sort of missing out some important sort of points that would help to further, you know, flesh things out to an extent that will make it easier for a listener, or you might have potentially undeveloped ideas. If it's longer than 4 minutes, you potentially overplay or sort of like overdo things with existing themes, or you really do need to change things up and add different angles to an existing set, or like a different sort of twist in the tale in order to keep things compelling. Here, well, there is absolutely no filler. There's enough instrumental diversity within the composition to keep things intriguing for people, regardless of whether you're necessarily used to the style of music or not. And ultimately, I think it's just a compelling instrumental performance without a note out of place. From the mixture of the kind of don kind of ambient textures, the kind of fluttering fluctuation with the rise of bringing us into the main verse of the piece, that you understand immediately that we've got our fundamentals covered and more in post. But it's just that really pretty note there that's not the root with that rise of that kind of, it's just kind of fascinating, really. We're not too dependent on the root note, if that makes sense. We resolve to it, but we kind of allow ourselves to fluctuate and float about a little bit. I like the halftime 16th note groove there. It almost feels like on the kit we're taking our time to really appreciate and understand the situation that we're in. There is an interesting kind of grit and grain on the or drive on the kit that makes it sound a little more sort of distinct and unique, and adds a bit more of a kind of an abrasive feel to it that I think, when you know, included with the subject matter and parts of the vocals, makes sense. There's a really kind of subtle bass line underneath it, which is a bit more kind of clean and gentle than those drum parts, which I just think is a nice contrast texturally, and allows for a bit of a clearer kind of root note or bass note foundation to the piece. That also works as a nice sort of support for a lot of those upper level guitar leads. The guitars are so soaked in reverbs and delays, and the way they peter around the mix is so kind of lush that it almost seems like kind of a synthy texture. It's got this kind of charm to it. It glows and it's very pretty. We aren't trying to be too literal, I think, with the way we have the note choices and how they interact with the vocals or the story itself. In fact, I think the real first genuinely heavy texture is that bass there, with that kind of distortion, that brittle kind of bass synth that we have there that just barrels its way into it. There's enough range within the frequency spectrum and stereo field for it to exist, primarily because of, even though we do have a bass element through the verse, it's a harder kind of sound which contrasts with the gentleness of the kind of electric bass. It insinuates that there is more than meets the eye in terms of the way that the track is trying to communicate with you, and just makes the chorus sound heavier. and it meshes neatly with some of the distortion or noisy effects that we have on the vocals in that part. There's also a fuzz guitar with some interesting hammer-on and pull-off parts that works the pentatonics neatly at the end of these tails there, and it's a nice, just kind of nice alternate lead to what's going on with the vocals. But I think we further develop that in different parts of the track there and allow it to sort of have its own room to breathe, and just having a different lead to the vocals allows for more sort of like variety in the piece and makes it more interesting to listeners, especially when the lower and the percussion is sort of with some, you know, drum fills that transfer between parts neatly with the use of the hi-hats, kicks and snares. This track is kind of split in two. It has a minute and a bit for the first half and a bit for the second verse and the second chorus there. It kind of works in a similar way to a lot of electronic music tracks I've heard there. And I feel like that additional bit of context in that verse just helps the second chorus to sort of hit home a bit more effectively. And having that fuzzy lead guitar finish the track with the vocals coming in to sort of sing along to those melodies there, it's just a nice little bit of extra development there to sort of signal us out. So ultimately, you know, you could have potentially have done more with the drum kit within this, but I feel like just again having those main sort of cymbal, crash, kicks and snares is enough to sort of get us sort of moving along with the quarters, eighths and sixteenths. The bass is very sort of effective at keeping a rhythmic sort of unison with that, as well as having its own identity. And there's a dynamic range that is caused by the lack of those more sort of brittle, intense upper frequency resonances in that second verse section by taking away again that heavy bass there, those lead guitars, to allow us to more effectively kind of like cleanse our palette and listen to the further context within that part. So I feel like again, there's dynamic range, there's a tight performance generally, there's enough composition diversity across the instruments, and typically they work well together. There's no moments where I was alienated or thought, why are we doing that there, why is this? And the track just finishes like that. It's done. You've just had your experience and you're sorted. Thematically, the minor leaning to this makes sense considering that it is not a particularly happy subject matter with the lyrics. I think that having the mixture of the pentatonics and the blues gives it more of sort of like a groovy kind of rocky feel. The digital synthy kind of elements there make it seem a bit more contemporary. There are some faux extensions harmonically within those verse elements with the way the different instruments kind of weave a tapestry, like the way they all come together, that is removed when you come into the chorus parts because again of a lack of some of those arpeggios and stuff like that. And we don't overcomplicate the theme there. It's just a sort of main 3-chord progression there. But having 2 different bass lines is definitely better than one. Studio recording, mixing and mastering wise, all the different from the start point with the fluctuations with the riser through the different guitar tones, the bass, the drums, the synth, etc., and the vocals, the different ways they were sort of double tracked or single tracked or presented with the call and responses or the main parts in the center. Things were fleshed out within the frequency spectrum, no word resonant frequencies, as well as the stereo field of music surround you in headphones, like some guitar parts and vocals literally going from that side with the automation there. I like that we had these filtered elements there where things would kind of add more of the high end as they come up there. I thought that was really neat. It just seems like the track is opening up as we provide more context lyrically there, which is really neat before we have that realization ascend into the chorus. There is dynamic range through the instrumental layering from a compositional perspective. Nice and loud, a bit of pumping, side chaining, bus compression, limiting was handled. And again, I feel like anything done post-processing wise, you know, with a mixture of delay and reverbs on various elements there, again, the literal kind of like driving noise and fuzzy elements and others. The vocalist could clearly sing. It's just that they wanted to have their own sort of tone and sort of effect, and I feel it was a smart idea to do so. Really competent vocal performance, and the fry was effective. No applicable constructive critique. From a general listener's perspective, I just feel like this was just a great use of time. I like when people make a little mini experience that you kind of go through, you sit with it, you absorb it, and you're done. Sometimes people overcomplicate tracks by making them longer than they are. But if you can provide the occasional drum fill there, different guitar sounds, and different bass lines, you got it sorted. And the vocals and any other bits of ear candy are the icing on the cake. So I wish them all the best in luck in future. But thank you very much for watching my review of this track from an act named Cicada, titled Malnourished, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go show us some love via their various social medias and the YouTube page. And stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need the help more than ever. Thought of crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next SB Reacts. Spiderhands out.